Hello. Welcome to our public workshop, budget workshop. For the audience at home, we will not be taking public comment. You can email our administrator, Heather Hunter, or you can send public comment to publiccomment@lewistonmaine.gov. Did I have that right, Administrator Hunter? Excellent. And yeah, let's please proceed, Administrator Hunter and Director Welsh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, City Council. Tonight we'll be talking about recreation. The recently appointed Recreation Director, Nicole Welch, is with me tonight. We will start the discussion on page 67 for the recreation. Nicole had, or the director had,
I've seen really bad movies start off this way, I'm just saying. That's
Comes in threes, look out.
We're certainly having an adventure. Please proceed, Administrator.
Okay, so we have 3 new programs and services from the Rec Department. The first is to hire a youth program specialist at a cost of a little over $81,000. The second request, and it kind of aligns with the information that was presented or left on your place setting tonight from the Senior Citizens Group, is to hire an age-friendly program coordinator at $67,000. That is net of the current part-time position that we are currently paying for. And the last one is to fund some youth corp temporary workers at a little over $4,800. Recreation administration is the first one. Overall, the entire rec department increased by $103,920, or 33%. Administration increased by $54,418, or 30%. Pretty much all of that was in personal services. We reorganized the department into a standalone department. We also converted a part-time building monitor position who is serving 2 part-time positions into a full-time building monitor role there. The contractual services increased by just under $1,300, and again, that's to fund some travel training. That's consistent. You will continue to hear that through all of the departments. And they had a small increase in supplies of $150, and then again, a small increase in the dues for the fixed costs. The Armory, which is on that same page, had an increase of $48,900, or 40.5%. $30,000 of that represents personal services. That is the general funds portion of the Aquatics program. So we did not, with the pool closed, we did not have that in past years. So when the pool was open, which was 3 years ago, general fund would allocate about $30,000 towards the lifeguard staffing and so forth, and then the activity funds paid the differential. So that reinstitutes that part-time wages for the Aquatics program. Mm-hmm.
Is that just for this, does that include all that you're gonna need to get is the pool prepared to come back online after 2 years of not being there? And I did hear from somebody today that owns a pool company that said the cost of chlorine, that pool shock and all of that stuff has gone like through the roof, and it's sometimes hard to find, the algae fighters and stuff. Are we prepared for all of that too? Yes,
we discussed that when we discussed the parks and open spaces. The actual maintenance of the pool falls within that budget.
Okay, thank you.
So looking at contractual services for the Armory, that had an increase of $13,250. Utilities rose by just under $6,600. With the increased activity that we are anticipating with the Armory, with the Maples coming and some of the Big Brothers, Big Sisters. Is that right?
Boys and Girls Club.
Thank you. I knew it was something. We are increasing the cleaning services for the building, so that had an increased cost of $5,300. And then repairs to equipment had about a $1,600 increase. They want to do some upgrades within the concession area to deal with some of these new programming. The supplies line also, our category also rose by $5,650. The bulk of that represents buying floor tape for events, and then natural paper products and so forth with the demand on the building. The senior citizens represents a small increase in cost of living for that part-time position. That's the position that would net against the full-time position if that new program and service request was approved for funding. So that's where that credit comes from when you look at the detail of that. Beginning on page 68 and continuing through page 71, this represents the rec activities fee. This is considered a special revenue fund for the city of Lewiston. It has nothing to do with a tax rate. It is a special revenue fund that, based upon the program guidelines and so forth, the director has the freedom to kind of do some pilot programs with the overall goal of each program being self-supporting. So obviously the Aquatics program is not self-supporting, so some of those programs make up for that. Further, she pursues various fundraising aspects and things like that to help balance the overall profitability of the special revenue funds. So when we make changes on this particular fund, or these particular accounts, they will not impact the tax rate. It's a standalone fund. So right now, I will also add that in this particular case, pretty much all of these programs have been shuttered since the pandemic. And fortunately or unfortunately, when Nicole first started here, I think we were just getting the program started and then the pandemic happened. So she's really not been through, I think, a full cycle of programs as they normally function and budgeted. So I think the revenue side, the tuition or registration fees, reflect very conservative numbers. Conversely, the wage side of the house is heavily impacted by the current labor market, the increase in minimum wages, as well as making sure the coverage ratios are correct for each one of those programs. So looking down through there, the overall program, like I said, is running about a budget deficit of about $25,000. They have fund balance similar to what general fund has. They have fund balance able to kind of weather some of those peaks and valleys until programs become more self-sustaining. And even with that deficit, it's still anticipated to have a fund balance at the end of FY23 of about $179,000. So there's some wiggle room there. So looking down through there, you'll see a variety of programs. The first category I call general and events. That has an overall surplus, as you'll note, of $8,800. They're looking at increases to fundraising of about $29,000 for ticket sales for York Wild Kingdom, Funtown, and so forth. You'll see the offsetting cost of the tickets budget under that miscellaneous service there, the second from the bottom line, that $26,000. So they're essentially getting a cut of the ticket prices on that. We are increasing interest revenue slightly, and the registration software is also playing a role in the change in miscellaneous services. The next activity is the rec day camp. We're looking at an overall surplus of about $1,600 there. We're looking at increased revenues of $7,450 based upon anticipated demand and early registrations. The theme that you will hear throughout the whole is increase in wages. That's pretty much going to be, as we talked about, the labor market and the increase in minimum wage are just to get people to hold these positions. They are now looking at budgeting field trips and separately, so you'll see that as a breakaway cost of the, not only the trips itself, but also transportation to get there. Volleyball is the next category that you'll see, has an overall surplus of $4,482. We have a decrease of about $2,000 in revenue. And between the temporary wages and the miscellaneous services, we had an overall decrease there of about $610. Track is running a deficit of $864. Again, this is a program that's just starting back up again, so these are very conservative costs, and that's. Tennis has an overall surplus of $300, and again, the theme you will see, conservative revenue, increase in costs, just trying to break even on most of these programs. Soccer, on the other hand, had a little bit more of a surplus of $1,358. We're looking at an increase of $4,800 in revenue, and then a decrease in miscellaneous services as they look for changes in field maintenance and so forth of about $2,100. Lacrosse is also running a small deficit of about $1,300. Revenues dropped significantly, $9,100 there. I'm not sure we've included all of the revenues. That may be an adjustment that we look at in the future. But again, that was mitigated by a decrease in temporary wages and a decrease in miscellaneous services from field maintenance costs. Field hockey had a surplus of $431, and all of that is pretty much programmed by the increase in revenue that's anticipated. And we had a small fluctuation in field maintenance in the miscellaneous services. That field maintenance fee, just as a reminder, that comes mostly charges from Public Works to maintain the fields for that labor and so forth. Basketball had an overall deficit of $1,500. We have a decrease of about $3,500 in revenue, and we're looking at decrease in wages there, but it was offset by an increase in miscellaneous services, and that primarily is made up of increased in costs for team shirts for the little ones in the program. Baseball is running a deficit of about $8,000, and again, that's based upon revenue not being projected at this point. That may be coming in at a much higher rate when we start looking at actual program registrations. But that's tempered by a decrease in other supplies of $3,000. In the prior year, there were dugout repairs. This now is being funded through general fund, so it's saving that cost. Cheering, and again, we're on page 70, about halfway through. Increase of projected revenue of just under $2,000, and we have miscellaneous services that increased by $1,700 based upon competition and judge fees. We have two kind of pass-through programs, is how I refer to them. That is the Mad Scientists and the theaters, and I see the subtotals didn't get changed on the caption, the descriptions there. But essentially, we are paying for registrations, and then we are turning the bulk of those registrations over to the contractual person that is providing that programming. We've talked a little bit about aquatics. You'll see that next. Right now, the two pieces include, you'll see the donation, that's from the general fund that we just talked about. And then temporary wages right now are expected to be about $60,000. We are looking at contracting this out, and that will be, an agreement will be before the council in a future meeting, probably April, the first.
Yep, April
The first, okay, the first one in April. So that'll allow you to review what the program will look like and some of the details regarding that. We have a $3,200 miscellaneous services, which covers cleaning and so forth of the bathhouse there, first aid supplies and whatnot. Pickleball does not have a lot of fluctuations with it. And then after-school care, childcare is a new program based upon need and anticipating having a surplus here of $2,350. And like I mentioned, the overall program, there were a couple programs that had no anticipated revenue that I think will come in and temper the overall decrease of the $24,975. But you'll see there's more than enough fund balance there to absorb that, to get those programs back on operation again. Any questions on rec or the activity funds?
Yeah, so what is Mad Scientist exactly?
Yeah, Mad Science, it's a, right now, there's a Maine-based program run out of Portland, Maine. And so this type of program, it's a week-long program running Monday through Friday, and they basically come into one of our senior center spaces. And we have between 10 to 15 kids that learn about a lot of like STEM projects. There's usually some sort of science or math theme, whether that be like aerodynamics, or they could be like detective work, talking about robotics. So it's kind of like the Mad Scientist you'd kind of see in like the old cartoon kind of feel to it. So last year was a pilot program. As I understand, they've tried to run it in the past, but they haven't really got a lot of response. It tends to be more of an expensive program, and I think it's one of the most expensive week-long programs you run, at about $285 a kiddo. But for that, and just like the public theater program, we as a department hold $5 to $10 as an administration fee. So in that situation, Mad Science, they're making a revenue to run their program. We're recouping some costs to put towards our software administrative costs.
Thank you.
Pickleball. That just at the high school or at the Armory as well?
So right now, we're finishing up our indoor season, and they are Monday, Wednesday, Fridays from usually about 9 a.m. to 12. And right now, we're looking into when they're going to move outside for the season. It's usually mid-May when the weather starts warming up.
And so your costs are like putting the tapes down? Because I know they don't have a designated court.
Yes, so they go down, I believe that the courts are now lined for pickleball play, but the players who go to the high school during the summer, they're responsible for setting up the equipment and then taking it down at the end of the day.
Because I was running against that the last time I played there, so.
About not having nets?
The tape
Oh,
coming-
okay.
Tape
Nope.
coming
As
out?
far as I understand, there's no more tape there, it's all lined up.
Okay, good, thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. Thanks, Marianne.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Would you repeat on the youth advisory, the senior, right at the beginning, under salary and wages? I didn't write that down. We have a new youth administrator, and the
Are we talking the program, or are we talking the recreation department?
Recreation Department,
Okay, the new program and services?
Recreation Administration, salary, wages,
Okay,
regular.
so we had,
Page 67, first line.
yep, so we had, it was before as a division under Public Works. We have moved that out, and now it's a standalone with Nicole serving as the department head. She has hired another recreation coordinator. And then we also have an additional person that's full-time now that was part of the activity funds. He was doing 2 part-time positions, and because of the scheduling and so forth, we had to convert him to a full-time employee. So that's what makes that increase.
2 part-time positions turned into 1 full-time,
Correct.
and then you added another full-time.
No, it converted it to, the funding source changed from the rec activity funds, the ones that we just went through, and converted over to the general fund for his payment of his salary.
Okay, so his salary was based earlier,
It was split into different funding sources, yes.
okay, and that is for the youth administration, or the youth?
The building monitor position, there's 3, it may help you to look at page
18.
Thank you. No, not 18.
Oh, not that with the
No.
new positions?
It's okay. On page 34,
It's on 36. Okay. So where am I looking?
so you're looking under the Division 4511.
Okay.
Those are the positions that are now in that department. So you now have a rec director, you now have the building program coordinator, that was vacant pretty much all of the previous fiscal year. And then the recreation building aide, that was the individual that had the 2 part-time positions that were meshed into a full-time, paid for by general fund.
And what does the recreation program coordinator and the building aide just assist the coordinator?
They're kind of 2 separate positions. So the recreation building coordinator, this person is in charge of implementing and overseeing our summer day camp, Camp Smiles. They also directly oversee the soccer programs, basketball programs, t-ball programs, a lot of the youth sports. Most recently, this person has started a safe sitter babysitting course. She has been offering a free cooking program for families in Lewiston. So she does a lot of all-encompassing kind of youth recreation programs. The recreation building aide primarily oversees our late afternoon to evening programs, which includes a lot of our evening and weekend rentals. Right now, we offer a lot of volleyball at night. The Maine Juniors, you may have heard, it's a prominent volleyball program in the area. They do a lot of rentals. And this person also oversees some light janitorial work, such as cleaning our floors, laundry on occasion, making sure basketballs are accounted for, and doing some inventory as well.
Okay, thank you. So whereas they were budget neutral before, because it was what you were saying earlier, you're taking it out of that section, putting it into that it's not budget neutral. You following what I'm saying? You're saying back on page 60, 67, 68, 69, all these are, they have no impact on the budget.
They have no impact on the general fund, correct?
General fund.
Yes.
So that was in that section before.
Part of those hours was in that section before. Now it's all part of general fund.
Other question, the senior citizen section, that part-time wage person, are you able to tell me what they're making? How many hours is that? I'm concerned that $13.50 an hour is not enough.
It's currently a part-time position at 19 and a half hours per week.
Okay,
Yep, and the city is responsible for paying 38 weeks out of the year, and the Lewiston senior citizens are responsible for paying the remainder of that, so 14 weeks.
and what does that position pay? Dollar amount per hour?
I believe it's minimum wage.
Yes, it depends on the qualifications. We've had some turnover in that position, so it's just starting out as an entry-level position. But,
My concern.
Yep.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
That's
cut you
okay.
off. My concern, they can flip burgers for $15 an hour. To get somebody in there to take care of the citizens at $13.50, I think that's an important position. So I'm personally all in favor of bumping it up at least to $15 an hour
Okay.
on that. And that's not I don't think we're overpaying anybody at $15 an hour for that position, particularly that they have been ignored for a while. So that's, I'm not done yet, 1 second. So that's that one. Why have we not, and maybe I'm missing it, softball program?
We rent the fields out to a local softball organizer, and they do usually a late spring, early summer, and then a fall ball league as well. So they rent out the Randall Road fields. So it's not something that Lewiston Recreation Director directly oversees, but we accept the facility rental, and then I work with open spaces to make sure the fields get prepped and lined and everything.
And we were talking about the differences between the 2 cities that used to be called sister cities, but we can't say that anymore. Auburn has stepped up with the void in Lewiston, has absolutely an amazing softball program. They've picked up on their rec department, and it is exploding. Their men's basketball, and a lot of things doing with adults. And I used to play in Lewiston. I sponsored 2 teams in Lewiston. Now there's no Lewiston teams. We drive to Auburn, and we play in Auburn. And we utilize some fields that are substandard. And we look at the fields over at Randall Road, and they're excellent. They're in good shape. We have 3 fields right there, and it just built some camaraderie amongst teams. Because afterwards, people would stay there until 9:30 at night. And I just think it's a shame that we have focused well on the youth of our community. We're trying to bring the focus back again for our seniors, and we're missing another age group, the young adults and old guys like me, and gals that go out and play. I think it's a shame. Tony Gow volunteered an enormous amount of time to get the softball program going, and it died a couple of years ago, and that's absolutely a shame. I'd like to see it start up again. We used to have, back in the day, they used to have horseshoe pits up at Marcotte Park, and they'd throw horseshoes. This was a huge recreation area, and I feel that we're losing something for that recreation part of it. So I personally have no problem committing, and really it's mutual. I know how much I paid for a sponsorship, so it pays for itself. It's not that it's costing the city money. I just don't know why we dropped the program, or programs are dropped. I'd like to see them get started back up. And the afternoon childcare, what age is that based on?
It would ideally be incoming kindergartners through grade 6.
Okay. And I know I'm jumping around, last question. With the Boys and Girls Club coming in, they were filling a void that we weren't doing, the presentation. How does that affect our budget? And are we still doing the same amount of programs that we were before with the Boys and Girls Club coming in?
So the Boys and Girls Club, they're aiming at grades 7, 8, 9, 10. They're really looking at that, ages 12 to 15, 16-year-old age group. They won't be taking any programs away from what we're offering because it's something that we just couldn't offer. We don't have the bandwidth to be able to offer programming for that age group, but we felt it was very beneficial. We had the space, and it was really a good match overall. So they wouldn't be overseeing any programming for grades K to 6.
Thank you.
Any other questions on recreation?
I just want to elaborate a little bit on what Councilor LaChapelle said about the activities that used to go on at Marquardt Park and all that. If I'm not mistaken, didn't we already talk about trying to build something up like that in our parks, activities, things that happen, make the city alive?
I mean, we are, I think, and I don't, Nicole, you can jump in at any time. I think part of that is getting it back and growing the capacity within the department. This department had significant turnovers right as the pandemic took hold, recognizing most programs were not being held because of the pandemic. There was a significant void in the department and the activities provided and the calendar and so forth. With that, with the hiring of Nicole, she is essentially starting from scratch on some of these programming and building it back up slowly. There is a limitation, obviously, with her time and her coordinator's time. Do you know how many employees the Auburn Recreation Department has?
I believe they have 9 full-time employees. And they have 3 recreation specialists. They have 1 person whose job specifically is to do adult programming. And yeah, with us, it's just bandwidth. A lot of us are playing, like wearing many hats. Typically right now, I would be reffing a basketball game between Tree Street and Lewiston recreation basketball teams. We're doing well with what we have, but manpower is really the driving force of what's really holding us back. We recognize those voids. We need adult programming. We need more youth programming. We love the idea of offering programs in the parks, and I think we spoke about it as well. But it takes advertising, it takes budgeting, and I really want to make sure that when we put out a new product, we're doing it well, we're doing it, we're being fiscally responsible, and we're also battling that burnout phase as well, because again, we're really putting a lot of hours in right now, and outside of what we're currently offering, there's not much more that we can kind of provide right now.
Thank you.
Yes,
I would say without additional staffing, is that correct?
correct. Yeah, thank you.
Any
Good.
other question? I'm sorry.
I was just going to say.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Director Welsh.
So now we are moving on to the utility funds. The first one is on page 80, it's the water fund. So the utility funds work a little bit differently than general fund. They're based upon cash flow projections. So each one of the utility funds, you'll see what's known as a pro forma, a cash pro forma. On page 80, you have the one for water, and we'll look at sewer and stormwater accordingly. I will start off, the utility funds had two new program and service requests. The first is to hire an additional asset management technician at about $76,000. Again, that's to build redundancy within the department. We discovered with turnover this particular year and regulatory requirements, we do not have the redundancy to cover for labor turnovers. So we are now having to contract that work out with the former employer or employee until we hire somebody. And that is a very, very specialized field, so we're having a hard time attracting. So once we get that, we'd like to build upon that so we have a deeper bench. The other is to purchase the Census customer portal with analytics. This is a spinoff of our meter reading program and our remote meter reading. And I'm sure Kevin, for those of you who have not met Kevin Gagney, he is the superintendent of water and sewer. And he will share a little bit more, but this has probably been the #1 item requested from our landlords to be able to dial in and look at running toilets, why the water bills are so high. With those bills going out on a quarterly basis, it's a little too late by the time they receive that bill to be able to do anything about it. So it allows them real time. And Kevin, do you want to share anything more about that?
We've got a focus group in the downtown is what we're prioritized on. So those were multi-unit apartment buildings. So from the river, Russell Street, East Avenue, that's been our focus the last 3 or 4 years. So right now we are collecting the data. It's available. So having the customer portal will be allowed to implement that for anybody that has that meter and that radio right now. So I think we're looking at around 3,000 possible meters that could have a customer portal and be able to monitor their use, set up alerts. And like Heather said, with the rising energy cost, having a high water bill, but usually triggers a higher sewer bill. That's something that the landlords have seen as value.
The initial installation of that program is about $25,250, and then it's just going to be annual maintenance and licensing after that.
Can I ask you a question? Is there going to be a service fee for people using that?
No, that's covered under the software package, and it's web-based, so the customer
Is the city going to charge?
I haven't proposed any of that. I haven't discussed that.
Okay, I
so.
just feel it's an added service. Not everybody is going to access it, and perhaps, a small fee to cover the cost of the program.
Any other questions? Okay, so looking at the water fund on page 80. As a reminder, In the last fiscal year, the water fund had a 23% rate increase. Revenues is responding to that rate increase, so you see an increase in revenues of $612,697 or 9.67%. The overall water utility fund increased expenditures by $143,383 or 2.28%. And it is programmed to generate an operating surplus of $518,635. So looking at kind of the similar things that we look by category at general fund, the first is the payrolls, and you can see that on page 80. Personal services in this particular case is relatively flat due to turnover. Regular time actually decreased by about $3,100, and that's in spite of collective bargaining agreements, the COLAs and the steps they still had. That just shows you the turnover from your more senior employees to your newer employees. And then they had the same increase projected for an increase in overtime. And that is across divisions within the fund that I'm speaking of. The fringe benefits, similar to general fund, had an increase of $26,788, and that reflects an increase in Main State retirement of $12,000, and then the health insurance based upon the new employee elections of just shy of $23,000. And we did see a small decrease in the combined deferred compensation and the retirement health savings plans. Again, when those more senior employees retire, obviously that particular benefit decreases. So those two decreased by about $7,700. Debt service also had a small increase of $20,000 to $421. And we saw the capital outlay fluctuation decrease by $67,000. This may be a good time just to jump back and talk about all the utilities. So on page 79, you will see all the capital requests for all three utilities. The top portion of that sheet are those capital-related items that are anticipated to be funded through user fees. The bottom portion of that sheet or that page is what's being requested through the capital improvement plan. So you will see on the water side, they have the annual meter replacement program for $170,000. They are splitting the cost of a dump truck between 2 fiscal years, so you'll see the first payment of that. We have some technical infrastructure between the failed shoring and the radio reads. That's those remote read meters. We have the Ferry Road mixer that was extended over multi-years for a funding source. So we're in 2 of the 3-year period. And then we have looking at replacing a tapping machine under the water side. We've talked about the LCIP side, but just as a reminder on the bottom, you'll have skate-in program improvements, we have some pump station repairs, and then we have the annual allotment for the distribution main repairs at $2.2 million. And if the council doesn't mind, since we're on that page, we might as well go through all of the utilities instead of flipping back and forth. Sewer has some similar technology replacement as well as a replacement of a dump truck, and then we are looking at the permanent metering for a CSO. And then stormwater has the storm drains related to the road rehabilitation project. The storm drain portion gets charged to the stormwater fund. That's $500,000. We have some emergency catch basin replacements at $20,000. And then we have related to the stormwater permitting, looking at that consulting fee of $50,500, and then the CSO permanent meter is split between water and sewer, so that's the other portion of that. Questions on the capital side of things?
Can you please remind us what CSO is?
Combined sewer overflow.
Right.
Mr. Mayor, I didn't know if you saw Counselor Delaney.
Counselor Jelinas, thank you.
I was just wondering if any of these projects outlined at the bottom here were projects that were put forth before and deferred, or if these are all first time up.
These are all, whoops, sorry. I believe they were all first time up. Some are continuous repairs, like a certain lump
Right.
chunk. But
Some of
the Hard Brook Water Restoration is a project that was scheduled for this year. Jepson Brook as well.
Okay, thank you.
The master plan is new too, so the three master.
Okay.
So if you want to flip back to page 81, we'll talk about the various operating expenses for water. Overall, all the operating categories had an increase of $163,206, or 12.85%. If you look at the source of supplies, which is your first division on page 81, that had an increase of $25,523. And it's pretty much all under contractual other, at a $24,000 increase. They are looking at, based upon the inability to attract some workers and the labor crunch, contracting out mowing for $24,000. That represents the entire increase within that division. The water treatment, which is the 6030 account, had an increase of $83,671. A portion of that represents our portion of the watershed budget, had a small increase of $3,250. Contractual management services, that's our portion of the staff employed by the Auburn Water District. We both have a water treatment staff group. We each pay 50% of each other's, so it allows for some neutrality and some equitableness. The balance of the increase fell within the chemical line item at $64,000. Again, that's attributed to the per unit costs increasing. When you're talking large quantity, that tends to add up. The distribution expense, which is on the bottom of page 81 and continues over to 82, had an increase of just under $20,000. We're looking at an increase in training of $2,000, and that speaks to the turnover I was referring about to, getting some of those new employees some needed skills. Repairs and supplies increased by $15,000. That's for the distribution system. And that, the bulk of that reflects increases in gas and diesel, and then paving is another $7,500. Similar increases that you're seeing here is what we talked about when we talked about the Public Works Department and their cost increases that what they were experiencing. The bottom of page, or actually the middle of page 82 talks about customer accounts. That's the billing department, and essentially that's housed on the second floor under finance, and the cost of the billing department is split between all three utilities. So we have one billing clerk that's split between three. Collections works that same way. We get the efficiency because the billing by customer is all under one customer account. So it allows for more uniformity in collection services. Looking at that division had an increase of $3,500. We had decreases in maintenance and licensing. And again, that reflects the fluctuations in the Beehive program. We saw that engineering had an increase because they're now allocating some of those costs to the engineering department. We are also looking at increases in contractual services. That's overhead charges for management of $2,200. And printing, you will see this as a common theme under all three in this particular division. The printing of the bill services, that's a contractual agreement. We do that over a 3-year period. That gets renewed this year, so we're anticipating a significant rate increase with that contract. The administrative and general administrative expenses, which is at the bottom of 82 and top of 83, had an increase of $57,295. Increases in all insurances, including health insurance, total about $31,320. And then you will notice halfway through the 6080 on page 83, you will see contractual services, accounting, legal, management, PW admin, executive. All of those accounts, and this will be the same for all three utilities, represent overhead charges that we are providing the service on general fund for these utilities. And so we are charging a proration of those costs. So that you'll see the offset in general fund under that salary reserve allocation. So the increase in those overhead charges are about $10,720. And then we have about $5,100 in additional training. And then we have dues that increase by about $2,000 based, some of the membership fees are based upon rate apportionments. So as our rates and revenues increase, likewise, those dues will increase as well. So that's pretty much water. Are there any questions before I jump over to sewer?
So, Councilor Pease, after you.
Sorry. Do we do any more printing here?
For billing, no, everything's contracted out.
Okay, so we don't have a print room upstairs anymore?
No.
Too bad.
So it's not necessarily that we were using more chemicals, it's just simply that the chemicals became more expensive.
For the most part, correct.
Thank you.
So if there are no more questions on water, we can jump to sewer on page 86. Like water, there is no recommended rate increase this year for sewer. Again, you'll see the cash flows on page 86 or the pro forma. We are anticipating an increase in revenue of about $275,700 or 4.2%, and an expenditure increase overall of $221,141 or 3.08%. You will see in the last column there that sewer is operating at an operational deficit of $559,450, but there's ample cash to be able to absorb that deficit. So that's why we are foregoing the rate increase for this year. Looking at the categories again, we have personal services had an actual decrease of $833. We have offsetting fluctuations where we have regular time that rose a little bit, but due to employee turnover and attrition, and that was tempered by a decrease in overtime. So not a lot of impact on the personal services side of the house. Looking at fringe benefits, we did have an increase here of $52,900. And again, that's made up of retirement increases of $9,400 and health insurance of $40,000. We are seeing two trends citywide is more and more new employees are taking the main state retirement versus the deferred comp, and they're electing to take health insurance. The good news is we did have a decrease in deferred compensation and RHS. That was about $4,300, but a decrease nonetheless. We'll take it. Looking at debt service, we had an overall increase here of just under $32,000 with the new bond we just issued last month. And then the other item that we could talk about is the treatment plant. That's our apportionment of the Water Pollution Control Authority. We're running about 66% apportionment rate. With that rate, they had an overall decrease of $18,000. They're experiencing the same turnover, plus some of their operating budget developed some efficiencies within the budget, so their overall operating budget decrease, which allowed our contribution to decrease as well. Capital outlay, based upon the fluctuations we talked about, overall had a decrease of $12,000 in requests for capital items. So looking at the operational items, which start on page 87, again, in totality, it increased by $167,000, or 21.84%. The pump station had a small increase of about $1,200, and again, nothing really material, just minor fluctuations between several accounts. We talked about the treatment plant already, so the next one would be the transmission operations on the bottom of page 87 and continuing to the top of page 88. That's where the lion's share of the increase took place at $140,685. We had an increase of $123,400 in contractual services. That relates to that asset management position that we were talking about for the new program and service. Until we can fill the employee's position, we have to pay that contractual service. So we are looking at hopefully extending some offers and having them actually accept and carry through and start, that we may be able to reduce this contractual service line item as we continue throughout the budget. We also had a request in there for contractual service for mowing, similarly to water for the pump stations. That totals about $20,400. And then the last fluctuation is in materials and supplies there, about $18,000, and that's covering pest management services and so forth throughout the sewer system.
Like for rats.
I wasn't going to go there. I refer to calling it pest management.
Please continue.
So on page 88, we have the customer service account. Similar to water, all of those changes are going to follow through for all three utilities. So in this particular case, we had that $15,000 increase. $5,900 of it was for maintenance and licensing. The other portion represents the increase in printing for the bills. Administration and general expenses, which falls under the bottom of page 88, the top of page 89, had an increase of $62,000. All insurances, including health insurance in this case, rose by $44,000. And then that overhead charge from general fund to the sewer fund increased by $12,470. And then they had an increase of just shy of $5,800 for training money for this particular fund. Any questions on sewer?
We anticipated reducing our contractual service once an employee came online, correct?
Yes, there will be some remaining contractual service with this former employee, depending on the skill sets of the new employee, because they would need to train them and bring them up to speed. But as we, as that person comes online, the contractual services should decrease.
And are we, in that sort of situation, are we bound for, like, did we, like, you know, purchase their time in, like, month blocks, or we can just...
It's on an hourly rate.
It's on an hourly rate?
Yes, so we can
Okay.
terminate at any point in time.
Understood, thank you.
The last utility to talk about is stormwater. That is on page 91. Again, we are not recommending any rate increase for this utility. The revenues remain relatively flat. They had, you know, a small $4,000 increase, but we had an overall increase in expenditures of $54,582, or 1.5%. You'll notice on the bottom right-hand side that it is running at an operating deficit of $640,782. But we have sufficient cash on hand to absorb that for at least another year, and we'll see how these two fiscal years play out. Looking at personal services, we have an increase of $54,000, so essentially all of the expenditures on the sewer fund fall into personal services, is one way of thinking of that. And as a note, there are no full-time positions that are dedicated to stormwater. The $54,000 increase represents charges from the general fund, including highway workers doing sweeping and so forth, to the stormwater fund. So there are no full-time employees here. Though if we were to cut personal services in the stormwater fund, we would have to increase the general fund. So regular time increased here by $64,586. And again, that includes not only cross-charging adjustments for work to be completed, but also the contract step increases and COLAs and so forth. We have a decrease that in temporary wages by just under $12,000 that offsets that increase. Fringe benefits, and again, those fringe benefits are fringe benefits that if we did not have a stormwater fund, general fund would have to absorb those fringe benefits. So fringe benefits decreased by about $500, and we had some offsetting fluctuations there. So we had health insurance that rose by $6,340, and FICA and Medicare combined that increased by $4,500. In this particular case, the allocation for health insurance decreased by $9,000. So that's why you had that small little variances, the net impact of those pieces. Debt service charged, paid by the stormwater fund decreased by $26,000. And then capital outlay request fluctuated by $1,500. Looking at the operating costs, which start on page 92 and continue to 93. Total operating cost increased by $25,625, or 5.13%. So if you look under planning and permitting, which is the first division, that had an increase of $18,441. Personnel cost from general fund totaled about $17,741. So we had some minor fluctuation in rental of equipment. And again, that rental of equipment is from municipal garage. So any changes, unless they're for an outside agency, any changes on this will impact general fund. The storage and retention overall had a decrease of $1,800 with some minor fluctuations. The collection system operation, the 6450, had an overall increase of $53,000. Personally, costs from general fund make up $40,000 of that. We have some contractual services for engineering of about $3,100 and material supplies $1,600. And then the rental charges from PW Municipal Garage, $7,700. So again, it's fluctuation between the general fund makes up the bulk of that. And customer accounts, similarly to the water and sewer, had an increase of $4,500. Again, that printing is making up about $3,400 of that increase. And we had an increase in contractual service for overhead charges of about $6,000, making up the rest of the fluctuation. So that is the utility funds in a nutshell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Questioning the thought of absorbing all the hit this year for some of these departments, where we know 24 is going to be a really tough year. If we use up all our funds, now 24 is going to be even harder. Where do we cut in 24?
So if I'm following your question, the utility funds, when we talked about holding 24 or 25, depending on when the actual reval is finalized. When we talk about that, we're talking general fund only. So these three are utility funds. They're paid through ratepayers. So the holding, the constant would be on the general fund operating supply side, not necessarily in these three funds. Recognizing there is some palatability to hold the rates steady through that as well, but it's not a direct correlation like the impact of the revaluation on the residential homeowner.
Do we at any time take monies out of the utility funds and move it into the general fund?
No. PUC has strict rules against that, not without significant support. So when we look at the overhead charges for like the director, HR, there are several ratios that we use to do that. So for example, the HR department is based upon the number of utility workers out of the entire full-time workforce. So there are always mechanisms to back up that overhead charge that is allocated to them. We pretty comfortable that we're tapping for most of the overhead that we could be tapping, but we don't want to exceed that.
Okay, thank you.
So the building rental is just renting city property. It's moving the cost, the actual costs from the city to these services.
It's the utilities paying for their annex building in the Public Works complex. Because we don't, I mean, we have separate metering and so forth, but it covers the overhead charge with that building property.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions from the council?
So if there are no other questions, just as a reminder, on Thursday, we will begin at 6 o'clock. We'll talk about police, drug forfeiture, fire, the 911 committee, the TIF budget, which also includes LA Arts, and then the Economic and Community Development Director will be presenting the CDBG budget. The paper that Kathy passed out earlier relates to Thursday's workshop.
Thank you, Administrator Hutter and Director Brenchick and Kevin Gagne. Thank you. Can I have a motion to enter into executive session to discuss a personnel matter?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we enter into executive session pursuant to MRSA Title I, Section 4056A, to discuss a personnel matter.
A second. Councilor McCarthy, are we taking separate votes?
No?
All in favor?
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just so you know.